Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
There's an abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town, the kind of place no one talks about, but everyone knows. Briarwood Asylum closed its doors in the late 70s after a fire gutted part of the east wing. Officially, the blaze was ruled accidental, but locals whispered about something far worse. Some say the patients set it themselves to escape the unspeakable experiments conducted behind locked doors. Others insist the fire was just a cover-up for something that should have never seen the light of day. Whatever the truth, the building was left to rot, a scar on the landscape, a place where no one dared to go. Jared, a self-proclaimed urban explorer, wasn't like most people. He sought out places exactly like Briarwood, the forgotten, the forsaken, the forbidden. His YouTube channel thrived on documenting eerie locations, and he was always chasing the next big scare. So, when he heard about Briarwood, he didn't hesitate. Armed with a high-powered flashlight and a camera, he climbed the rusted fence one crisp autumn night and made his way inside. The first thing that struck him was the smell. Damp rot, mildew, something else, something foul. His footsteps echoed down the decayed hallways where remnants of the past still clung stubbornly. Rusted gurneys, shattered medicine bottles, and old, water-stained patient files lay scattered on the floor. Faded murals of cheerful landscapes lined the walls, their colors long since leached away, leaving behind ghostly images. Jared had expected silence, but Briarwood was alive with sounds. A faint shuffling, the distant creak of old hinges, a whisper? No, just the wind, he told himself. The mind plays tricks in places like this. He pressed forward, speaking into his camera about the asylum's dark history, about the patients who were left here to rot when funding ran dry. His breath clouded in the cold air as he stepped into what had once been the children's ward. A single wheelchair sat in the center of the room, its wheels rusted and fused in place. Scattered toys lay around it, an eyeless doll, a headless rocking horse. The air here was thick, pressing against his chest. As he panned his camera, something flickered in the periphery of the screen. He froze. Rewinding the footage, he squinted at the screen. There, standing at the far end of the hallway, just barely visible in the flickering light, was a figure. Jared's pulse hammered in his ears. He whipped his flashlight toward the spot, but there was nothing. Just empty hallway. His hands trembled slightly as he kept moving, trying to shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The deeper he went, the worse it got. Shadows seemed to move just beyond his vision. Whispers slithered through the air like distant breaths. He knew fear was getting the better of him, but he pressed on. Then he heard it, a wet, dragging sound from down the corridor. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like something being pulled across the floor. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to check it out. His flashlight beam cut through the dark, landing on a figure at the end of the hall. It was tall, impossibly thin, its skin stretched taut over a skeletal frame. It had no eyes, just deep, hollow sockets that seemed to drink in the light. Its jaw hung open at an unnatural angle, and from its mouth came a sound like a wheezing rattle. In its hand, it dragged something long and heavy. A rusted chain? A length of bone? Jared stumbled backward, his camera shaking violently. The thing twitched, then jerked toward him in a sudden, unnatural motion, as if its body didn't quite know how to move properly. Panic overtook him. He ran, his breath ragged, his heartbeat a deafening drum in his ears. The halls twisted and turned, all sense of direction lost. He found a door and shoved through it, slamming it behind him. He was in a stairwell now, spiraling downward, deeper into the asylum's belly. The stench was unbearable, thick, metallic. The walls here were damp, streaked with something dark. His flashlight flickered. Then, just as he reached the bottom, it went out completely. The darkness was suffocating. He fumbled with his camera's night vision, switching it on. The screen bathed the space in eerie green light. And that's when he saw them. Rows of figures lined the corridor, motionless, their faces hidden beneath cloth sacks stained with old dark patches. Some stood. Others sat hunched over, heads lolling at odd angles. Their chests rose and fell in shallow, jerky movements. Jared's breath hitched. They weren't statues. They were breathing. The one closest to him twitched. The sack over its head shifted slightly, as if it was turning toward him. A low, ragged whisper filled the air. "You shouldn't be here." A hand shot out, bony fingers wrapping around his wrist with an inhuman grip. Jared screamed, wrenching himself free, bolting back the way he came. He didn't look back. He didn't stop running until he crashed through the broken front doors, gasping for air beneath the cold night sky. His footage survived, but when he reviewed it, there was nothing. No figures, no whispers, just him, stumbling through empty hallways, talking to himself, except for one frame. One single, chilling frame. As he turned in one of the hallways, just before he ran, there was a shape behind him. Tall, thin, eyeless, its mouth stretched wide in a soundless scream. He never spoke of Briarwood again.
Story number 2.
The old church had been abandoned for over 50 years, standing like a decaying sentinel at the edge of town. The locals avoided it, claiming it was cursed. They whispered that the original congregation had vanished in the early 1900s, their disappearance never solved. Some said the building was haunted by the spirits of those lost souls. Others believed something much darker lingered inside. One evening, a group of 5 friends, Zach, Mia, Kyle, Sarah, and Ben, decided to venture inside, attracted by the stories and a desire to prove the rumors wrong. They made their way through the overgrown yard, pushing past the rusted gate, and approached the decaying building under the cover of twilight. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon, and the air had a chill to it. As they crossed the threshold, the wooden doors creaked ominously behind them. Inside, the church smelled of mildew and decay, the air heavy with years of neglect. The stained glass windows, once vibrant with colors, were now cracked and clouded with dirt. The pews were overturned, scattered across the floor like forgotten relics. The smell of dust and rot filled their noses as they stepped deeper into the dimly lit sanctuary. Ben, always the skeptic, shrugged and pulled out his flashlight. "This place is just old. There's nothing here. Let's look around and get out." The others hesitated but followed, their footsteps echoing eerily in the emptiness. As they walked through the main hall, the temperature seemed to drop, and the walls seemed to press in on them. The further they went, the heavier the air became. Mia stopped, sensing something wasn't right. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Others paused, straining their ears. At first, they heard nothing, just the sounds of their own breathing. Then a faint sound like a whisper came from the far end of the church. It was so faint, they almost thought they had imagined it. "Must be the wind," Zach said, trying to mask his growing unease. But the whisper came again, clearer this time, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, like someone walking across the wooden floor above them. Kyle glanced nervously at the others. "There's no one here. Let's just check the upstairs and leave." The group made their way to the stairs, the wood groaning beneath their feet. As they reached the second floor, the temperature dropped further. A strange, almost oppressive silence filled the air. The floorboards creaked under their weight, and they found themselves drawn toward an open door at the far end of the hall. Inside, the room was dark, save for a single candle flickering on the ground. Its flame burned low, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. The walls were adorned with old, faded paintings of scenes that seemed off. The figures in the paintings had blank, lifeless eyes, their faces contorted in unsettling ways. "That's weird," Sarah muttered, her voice trembling. "Why is there a candle here?" Before anyone could respond, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. The room plunged into darkness and the candle flickered out, leaving them in total blackness. Ben fumbled for his flashlight, his hands shaking. "Okay, this is creepy. We need to go." Suddenly, there was a loud thud from the corner of the room. Something or someone was moving. Then the sound of dragging footsteps echoed through the dark, slow and deliberate, as though something heavy was being pulled across the floor. "Who's there?" Kyle called out, his voice cracking. No answer came, just the scraping sound getting louder. "Ben, turn on the damn light!" Sarah's voice was a panicked whisper. Ben flicked on his flashlight, but the beam revealed nothing but the empty, decaying room. The dragging sound, however, had not stopped. Without warning, a figure appeared in the doorway, a tall, hunched figure cloaked in shadow. It was hard to make out its features, but the glowing eyes that reflected the flashlight's beam were unmistakable. Zach backed away, his mouth dry, his heart pounding. "What is that? What the hell is that?" The figure didn't move, but its eyes seemed to follow them as they backed toward the door. Then, in an instant, the door slammed shut again, trapping them inside. Panic set in. They banged on the door, screaming, but the sounds were swallowed by the thick silence. The temperature continued to drop, and the room felt as though it was closing in on them. Mia, her face pale and trembling, screamed as she saw a hand emerge from the darkness, long and thin, reaching toward her. Without thinking, she bolted toward the window and threw herself through it. Glass shattered as she landed on the ground outside, screaming for help. The others followed, tearing their way through the door, now somehow unlocked. They didn't look back as they ran, their breath visible in the freezing night air. They never spoke of what happened in the church again, but they could never shake the feeling that something was still watching them. Weeks later, the local authorities were called when a man went missing near the church. When they arrived, the building was still abandoned, yet the door was wide open. The man's body was never found, but the police claimed they found strange markings on the floor, drag marks, leading into the church's deep, dark basement. No one ever dared to set foot in that church again. Some say the souls of the lost are still trapped inside, waiting for the next unlucky visitors to stumble in.
Story number 3.
There's an old, abandoned hospital on the outskirts of a small, forgotten town. It's the kind of place everyone knows about, but no one talks about. The building has been standing there for decades, decaying and decimated by time. The windows are shattered, the roof caving in, and the walls are covered in layers of grime and rot. The air around the place always feels heavy, suffocating, as if something is watching you from the shadows. The hospital, known to locals as St. Mary's Sanitarium, closed its doors in the late 1960s. Officially, the reason was overcrowding and a lack of funding. But there were whispers about the unethical experiments that went on behind those crumbling walls. Whispers about the patients who were subjected to unimaginable horrors, treatments that never made it into medical journals. Some even claimed that the building itself had become cursed, a place where the line between the living and the dead was thin, almost non-existent. In the years after it closed, people went missing around the area, though none were ever found. The townfolk avoided the place, keeping their distance and warning anyone who might be curious to stay away. But curiosity has a strange way of drawing people in. One night, a group of friends, young, reckless, and eager for a thrill, decided to make their way into St. Mary's Sanitarium. They had heard the stories, of course, but they didn't believe in the supernatural. It was all just superstition, they said. They were going to prove everyone wrong, get some footage for their YouTube channel, and leave. They snuck in through a hole in the fence, the rusted metal groaning as they squeezed through. The air around the building was cold and still, almost as if the place was waiting for them. Inside, the walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, and the floor was covered in broken glass and scattered debris. Faded signs once directing patients to various departments now hung crookedly, their words barely visible. The group walked through the hallways, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air smelled of mildew and decay. As they ventured deeper, the temperature seemed to drop even further. It wasn't just cold, it felt wrong, like the very atmosphere was thick with something they couldn't see, but could definitely feel. They made their way into the old psychiatric ward, where the walls were covered in strange symbols, some carved into the plaster, others painted in dark, faded red. It looked like someone had been trying to communicate, but the message was lost, or perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Suddenly, they heard it, a soft sound like footsteps echoing from the floors above. They froze. Everyone held their breath. No one had been in the building for years. The place had been abandoned. There were no maintenance crews, no one. But the footsteps kept coming, slow and deliberate, as though something or someone was pacing just above them. It wasn't just the sound that was unsettling. There was a presence in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Mia, the bravest of the group, led the way to the staircase that ascended to the second floor. As they climbed, the darkness seemed to press in around them, suffocating and oppressive. They reached the second floor, where the hallways were lined with closed doors, some cracked open, others locked shut. They could hear faint sounds behind the doors, soft whispers and scratching noises, like fingernails running along the inside of the walls. The group was on edge, but none of them wanted to be the first to turn back. They kept moving until they found a door that was slightly ajar. The room inside was dark, the only light coming from the weak beam of their flashlights. As they entered, they saw it, a chair in the center of the room, old and worn, but still somehow intact. What really caught their attention was the figure standing next to the chair. At first, they thought it was a person, but when they shone their lights directly on it, they realized it wasn't. It was a mannequin, but its face was grotesque, the features twisted in a permanent expression of agony. They backed away slowly, their hearts racing. The whispers seemed to grow louder, closer, like they were circling around them. And then, from the corner of the room, they saw something move. A shadow, crawling along the floor, its limbs unnaturally long. It stopped when it saw them, frozen in the dim light. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were hollow pits, empty and dark. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the room. Panic set in. They scrambled, trying to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers turned to frantic murmurs, and the shadow began to twitch, crawling toward them in jerky, unnatural movements. Ben, one of the friends, tried to break a window to escape, but his hand slipped, causing him to fall to the floor. The shadow stopped in front of him, its cold breath heavy on his face. It wasn't human. It was something else entirely, and it was hungry. With a burst of adrenaline, they managed to break the door open. They ran down the stairs, through the hallways, the sounds of their footsteps echoing behind them. But there was something else now, the sound of something dragging, something following them. When they reached the front door, it wouldn't open. They pulled, yanked, and screamed for help, but no one could hear them. The dragging sound got closer. Finally, the door flew open, and they tumbled into the cold night air. But as they ran away from the building, one of them, Kyle, looked back. From the top floor window, he saw it. The shadow, standing still in the window, watching them. Its hollow eyes followed their every move, and in that moment, he realized they hadn't escaped. They were being watched. The group made it to their car, but they never spoke about what happened that night. Their footage, when reviewed, was nothing but static, save for the last few seconds. A brief image of the shadow in the window, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. They left town the next morning, and none of them ever returned. St. Mary's Sanitarium was left to decay, waiting for the next group of curious souls to wander in. But the locals know better. No one ever returns from that place.